All right, awesome. Wayne, welcome to the roundtable. To kick things off, do you mind just giving a quick overview of your background for anybody who's not familiar?
Yeah, my name is Wayne Chang. I am a serial entrepreneur. I got into startups before they called it startups. So I started programming when I was seven, on Apple IIe green screen. And they were really like toys back then. Who knew that the Apple IIe would turn out to be the beginning of this huge revolution? We're now even talking to a later iteration of it right now. Got into startups and co-founded a whole bunch of different companies and still loving the dream, loving the journey. My goal is, can we continue to use technology to create a high impact for humanity, right? And that means different things at different points in time. And right now we're at a really interesting time with technology.
Love it. You have such an interesting background. You've done so much and everything from starting a business that was featured in the Social Network movie, right? That obviously a very interesting story there. And then starting many companies after that. And now you're in the LLM space and you're starting something that is much needed. We were just talking last week about LLMs in enterprise and some of the concerns around security and privacy. Why this space? Why did you decide to take on the challenge here and the specific application that you're working on? Just curious about the inception of that.
It starts with enterprise, but it touches us all. And the reason why LLMs, I happen to go where people's focus are. And a long time ago, it was file sharing music. And then it was social networking. And then it was mobile. And then it was, a whole bunch of different things. And now in this day and age, AI. And it turns out there's this it's like alien technology just arrived. And we're all trying to figure out how this impacts the way we live. And what people aren't really thinking about is, by the sheer act of interacting with it in that moment, that itself is the risk, is the vulnerability. And I don't think enough people really realize it. All it takes is one bad taste, boom, it's gone. You can never retrieve that. And so I think there's no greater risk at this moment than everybody's sensitive data privacy, and not just corporations, but your own, your family, your mom, your grandmother's, all that data. Someone at ChatGPT or anyone asks, how can I help you? That right there is so innocent, but it could do so much damage.
I love the framing around following people's attention and where society is focusing at large. I'm curious, as a serial entrepreneur, how you balance focusing on the immediate pain points, but also maintaining that longer term perspective of predicting where the ball will be a couple of years into the future. With LLM Shield, it seems like you're solving a really immediate need that a lot of companies have identified. How do you balance that with having a longer term strategic view?
I usually ask that question before I start committing my time into it, through the validation process, right? And a lot of the questions come out to be, is this solvable by OpenAI or any of the big LLM companies themselves? And today was just released. The OpenAI has a toggle, and that toggle is, can I clear my history and also make sure that OpenAI doesn't train on my data? And you see all of the articles about it, and it says, TechCrunch is like, OpenAI releases its privacy controls. Let's break that down a little bit. What's really happening is the sensitive data is leaving your computer. It's being transmitted over the wires. It's being received on the other side by who knows, whichever cloud of computers. It then is being fragmented and synthesized and stored. And then you get a pop-up that lets you say, let me delete. That's really dangerous. And I don't think that we really want to train population to do it on server-side discarding versus on-device filtering. Protect the information before it leaves your laptop, for instance. I think that a third party or some other solution than the major vendors have to occur. So that's the rationale for moving forward with LLM Shield.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Wayne, what are your thoughts on why this privacy security is such a bigger issue now with the world of ChatGPT versus where people before were using like Google search, or like you didn't hear about it as much with people worried about pasting sensitive stuff into Google search or web search? Is it the more human feel of a chatbot that maybe makes it? Or I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's all of the above that you just said, right? A Google search is almost like it's like almost like a very transactional, just one time only, and then you can click next. But the results are very similar, and it's also a result that probably another human put together, right? There's no synthesis, there's no reasoning, there's no thought around it. ChatGPT, it's a productivity tool. Like this alien technology also performs productivity increases, and so especially in places of work or even places when you're help me review my resume or help me look at this customer list and find out, add these addresses in here. That right there, you're giving them that information. And there's a reason why OpenAI by default has that training thing, right? Because they want that information and they want to make you pay for you to potentially turn it off. Pretty dangerous if we're trusting that OpenAI will do it. Maybe they're great, but also not just OpenAI. Any other URL besides chat.openai.com, right? If you build it on top of OpenAI, who knows what an intermediary is doing with that data, right? I could say, I am helping you with military map configuration. Show me your secret locations and I'll draw a pretty map for you. Now I have all of your locations for military, right? And so like, that's just a very extreme example on how to get military secrets. But you can imagine honeypots of these type of AI helpers that are really there to take your information.
Really interesting. And one of the things that we were discussing last week was, what is the future of LLMs in enterprise going to look like? Is it going to be more of these general models like an OpenAI, or are we going to see companies maybe self-hosting smaller models and then fine-tuning them for their own use cases, almost creating AI employees, I guess you could say? There's a bit of a trade-off, it seems, when it comes to training these models to become more personalized for the task at hand. And you can imagine like personal AI assistants, which is something that several companies are working on. Those companies are pulling in some of the user preferences, context about specific users in order to become as good assistants as they can be. Because the more context they have, the more they can serve the exact needs of the person that is using them. And so what does that balance look like between protecting the privacy of users and preventing them from leaking what could be confidential information that they don't want to leak, while still pulling in some of those insights and some of that data for the sake of personalization and improving the user experience?
There are many different ways to do this. The centralized way that's happening right now is the one that's probably the easiest, but also on the other side of the spectrum, the riskiest. And so it's easy for adoption, very easy to plug in. You just go to a centralized place and just do it. The hardest one, if you flip that over, is on-device LLMs, right? And so you secure it all. But it's really hard to get that implemented because the technology and the hardware and the battery life and all that stuff come into play. I am a fan of the on-device because I think technology will catch up, things will catch up, but we shouldn't have to trade off our data privacy and our security for a little bit of productivity boost. Again, one bad case, right? So whatever problem you're asking this LLM to do, is it really worth giving up the entire data privacy of that whole document or that whole series of documents, right? And the answer is almost always never. And so that will change when we start getting more to on-device scanning, on-device filtering, or on-device LLMs. That's just one minute.
Yeah, if you see that, I think desktop obviously makes a lot of sense, but it's expanding to other mobile phones or wearables, watches. I think could be an interesting problem too, of the personalization of all your devices connected, running on device.
I totally agree. And I don't see I see a world where it's kind of weird because Apple is very late to this game right now. But on the on-device side, they're actually the pioneers, right? And so like Siri has this huge potential to be the very first on-device LLM, privacy respecting, and it's still super helpful. It already has access to all your information, right? And then so would you, at that moment when Siri AI comes out and it's on-device LLM and it understands everything, your whole calendar, all your preferences, baked right in, iOS to iOS, device to device, would you then trust a random third party that's hosted to then with that information? Probably not. And so like when you pointed with that calculus right there, I think, I think the point's very, very clear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a good comparison to Apple. They're set up perfectly for it with their kind of closed ecosystem, and everything already works really well together. And I think if they're able to catch up, they have the groundwork there with Siri and the devices. And if they're able to come out with something really cool, that could be really powerful. And also, I think privacy as well would be a big plus on that.
Not to mention the on-device neural engine that they've been working on and all the advancements they've made there. I think it'll be really exciting to see what they come out with in June. Any predictions, Wayne, for what Apple's going to come out with? I just feel like they're just going to come from behind and shock everyone.
Oh, I mean, everyone's so excited about the goggles, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah, my guess is I think according to the illustrations and the designs that they've released for the event, it's clear that VR or AR, some form of that, is going to be at the center of the stage. But I think AI is going to be very integral to that experience. I think that like voice AI, especially, which obviously can capitalize on all the advancements made in NLP with large language models over the past few months and years, I think that is going to be pretty integral to that experience. So from what I've heard through the Twitter sphere, it seems like the folks that have tried it out are really blown away by it. So I think it's going to be a double whammy. I think it's going to be VR, a really cool VR experience that's obviously plays really nicely with Apple's ecosystem, their walled garden, and also some really cool AI capabilities. And I think Siri is finally going to become useful for things beyond setting alarms and reminders.
Agree. And we should postpone this then until that goggles comes out, because then we'll probably be recording this in the AR space.
Ever. Avatars, yeah.
That'd be a funny follow-up. We can just do the follow-up and say how we predicted it, and then we'll all have our goggles on for the next video.
Yeah. We'll have to add a reminder for that for sure. So obviously there was a big update from OpenAI earlier today. The ChatGPT business, I think, is what they're branding it as. And it's not a surprising update, right? I think there were some details around OpenAI's Foundry that they had released a few months ago, and they were hinting at this as well, like more enterprise grade features and functionality. And part of that was just increased privacy and security. And I think they've also taken some incremental steps to protecting the privacy of their users. So do you mind talking a little bit more about what concerns still exist for folks that might be using OpenAI ChatGPT business or something along those lines?
I think OpenAI had to do something. They had to react and do something in privacy policy, right? But by nature of LLMs, the more data you have, the better it is. And so it's very contradictory, right? A privacy policy with a data hungry AI model. And so they're walking a fine line, and that's great. They reacted this way. It's great. But the risk still exists. Again, the data that you want, imagine it's really highly sensitive data, whatever it is, in whichever form, whether it's customer data, privacy, or maybe like personal health data, maybe HIPAA data, maybe military secrets, whatever it is. It's on your device or it's on your team's device. You don't know what they're doing with it. There's no visibility at this moment. And so what OpenAI is saying is it's okay. Have that sensitive information leave your company network, leave your company devices, get transmitted over the open wires, have it come onto our servers at Microsoft or Azure or wherever, and then let us synthesize it and process it. And then we'll give it optionally to your employees if they find the settings to then toggle it off and then trust us that we'll delete it all, right? You can prevent all of that by just having on-device scanning. And so that's technology that I wish came out. That's what we're building with the LLM Shield. But having server-side discarding as the default, and then actually that's not even default. The default is, no, I am going to train on your data. Whatever you put in this little info box, I am going to take it. I am going to train on it, and it's going to be available for everyone to use. That's a default. And then the setting above that is, okay, trust us, we'll delete it, but still keep on sending it to us, right? And no matter what happens, they're still keeping all your data for 30 days.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And another issue I would anticipate in that scenario is that employees might not be using ChatGPT business. They might accidentally be logged into their personal account. They might be using a board. If we imagine domain-specific LLMs proliferating, maybe there will be a suite of Gen AI LLM products that they're referencing day to day. How are you thinking about interoperability for LLM Shield and being compatible across the suite of LLM products that an employee might use?
Yeah, thank you for that nice layup question. Amazing. So LLM Shield actually supports all the major LLMs at the moment. So it detects OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Bard, Microsoft's Bing, Chat, and then Anthropic's Claude, very, very popular. I think Quora implements it. But I heard a story yesterday. I can't really name the sources, but Google has instructed Google employees to not use Bard when they're coding with Google Code because Bard trains on whatever is being put into it. And so we're still at a very early stage in LLM privacy and LLM security, but even the manufacturers themselves are warning their own employees.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The coding point is something I was thinking a lot about as I was looking at GitHub Copilot and Bard and all the coding things. And I think there's going to be a real issue there too, where if they're training on all this code, and then you can get into copyright issues as well, where it could pull in if it's trained on open source code that maybe has a non-permissive license and you don't realize that it pulls in some code, and then down the road you get audited or for some reason, and then it comes up, oh, it looks like you just copied and pasted when really it was AI generated. There's also the issue there too, where the models that everybody's using is training and that's internal code, and then that gets spread around, and it's a really results in a really interesting world. And I think the open source and code and licensing is already challenging enough, and it's only getting more and more complex.
Exactly. This is so interesting. Again, it's like alien technology just came here, right? And like everything that we use to protect ourselves for all of these kinds of environments no longer exists. And we're all trying to figure out what to do with it. But in the meantime, it's like a black hole because it's continuing to suck in more and more information, right? So like as we are trying to figure out how to accommodate this new technology in society, we should probably start preventing it from doing immediate harm, which is, data sensitivity and the leakage.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And Wayne, just take a step back. I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on like the future of LLMs in enterprise, and specifically, obviously the past few months have been it's just taken off like a wildfire. Every company in the world has been talking about deploying generative AI capabilities. I think Q1 2023, there was double the previous high of mentions of AI on earnings calls. And so it's just top of mind for companies. We're seeing the biggest companies in the world rolling out AI capabilities. Do you see this as a bubble? Do you see this as something that's here to stay? I'm assuming that since you've planted your flag in this industry and started building out LLM Shield, I have a guess as to what your answer is going to be, but I'm just curious to hear your POV on it.
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of a massive exponential growth curve, right? What used to be like this, it used to take 18 months, 36 months to build out, is now going to be like this, right? And so that means that products are going to come into market much, much faster. New features are coming to market much, much faster. Lots of stuff's going to happen. Every engineer, even non-engineers, now can build things. And so what happens is we have basically an unlimited resource pool of coders now through ChatGPT and through these other AI tools, and instantaneous response. So that means you have high iteration cycles, which condenses the development time. And so enterprises that wield this technology, they're going to blossom a lot faster. They're going to hit their development roadmaps, product roadmaps a lot faster. They're going to make their things more fully featured. They're going to make their users a lot happier in many different ways. And that's great. That is great for society, and that's great for humanity, right? We all want that future of flying cars going by, and we all want that future of like everything on demand. Press it and it just materializes, right? And so like technology like this helps us get us there. Downside is it's very risky at the moment because, again, that one copy paste, you don't know where that shows up. I could be asking, what's the customer list for a profile of this type of company? And out pops maybe your list, out pops maybe someone else's, or there's many different ways that this technology can be used very negatively. And so there's a way where we can reduce the downside potential and only get the upside yield. That's awesome. But if it's too much exposure on the negative, we're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think there's also on that, we saw there's like the public perception as well, and those that aren't as ingrained in tech and understand it as well. And I think you even saw it with Snapchat's AI rollout and had a really negative response, I think, across the US. And a lot of my friends that maybe aren't in tech, now I'm working in an AI company and they're like, what's it like? Why? I need to stop. And you have some really bad privacy cases come out and become public. And if you have some of that public perception that starts to turn really negatively, it could slow down a lot of progress that could be made as well. So I think that is really important and yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and to that point, it's like everybody hears about the word privacy, and it's so nebulous, right? It's like hearing the word like confidential or something. It's just like, what is it? It's like, to be very, very crisp. Some of the things that we mean by privacy, and this is to, I guess, the audience. When you copy and paste something like an API key for this audience, like the API key that's there, or the secret, the token code, or things that are embedded, and you're literally one of you, or your developers, or some intern somewhere is just copy and pasting code and helping fix a bug, and one slip up, and they have your directory listing, the way you architected your proprietary code, your functions, whatever it is, it now has it. And now it can help others get there, or it might even spit back. You can even type into ChatGPT, give me an example of an OpenAI, right? And it'll just start popping out stuff. And then there's another example where it can help generate actual functional Windows keys, activation keys, right? And so like, these are small examples of the sensitive type of data. Not even into the passwords, social security numbers, all.
When you were looking for the next big project to work on, what was there like an aha moment? Was there like a particular piece of breaking news that just made you realize the severity of the risks involved with privacy in this space? Or was it like the straw that broke the camel's back and a bunch of news piling on top of each other?
ChatGPT launches, and then immediately start using it. And for the very first time, how many input boxes are you using daily, right? And now all input boxes in every software on every website could potentially be adversarial. You have no idea, right? And so everybody's embedding LLMs or SDKs. They're embedding it into, Microsoft is releasing Copilot across all their software. Other companies are introducing more and more. Now everything is going to be LLM based. And what does that mean when it comes to your data or your company's data, or things that you're investing millions of dollars producing or protecting?
I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a very prescient point. I think it's something that maybe is lost amidst all the excitement of the technology, right? Obviously, this is such a huge technological development. LLMs have been around for a while, but we've never seen the levels of adoption and proliferation as we've seen since the arrival of ChatGPT on the scene. So I think most people are just very excited for what's happening in the space, and they're maybe putting the cart before the horse and not really considering some of the risks involved. I know there's a lot of really serious risks at hand. And when you touched on a lot of them, there's also prompt injection attacks that we've heard of. We've heard of attacks where people will throw a bunch of random inputs at LLM to almost reverse engineer how that LLM works and take away some of the proprietary architecture that a company may have built with a fine-tuned LLM. So I think it's one of those things where some of the best ideas are also, they sound very obvious, but people may not be focused on them. And we think about this quite a bit. And it's really great to see that you're addressing the issue head on. What we discussed a lot of is the problem in the space and the challenges in regards to just protecting the privacy and helping users stay secure, companies remain secure. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about LLM Shield and how it works and some of the things that it's able to provide to its users to prevent some of the issues we talked about?
Sure. But one small point before getting to that would be the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened was pretty big when it came to, Facebook, and it was like the counterweight to the whole social and the social network phenomenon. This, I think, will eclipse that magnitudes, right? If it's like unchecked. And Cambridge Analytica was like almost like a baby version of this because there was no synthesis really, and all the synthesis was very manually done. It wasn't at the power of like GPT-4 or later iterations of this. LLM Shield is trying to address this by doing exactly what I said before, which is just, we have a small little menu app icon, very, very lightweight. I feel like security software tends to feel pretty heavy. It's always constantly in your face. It's always scanning. It just feels super heavy. And so I wanted to do something super lightweight, and it only activates when it detects an LLM. And so the icon will just turn, the shield will turn a different color. You know it's on, and it's now protecting you. And so it'll do on-device scanning, meaning literally just like a chat input box, right, that you're putting data into. And so you can do all kinds of text scanning, do all kinds of anything, all of it on device. And then you can block it from being sent, detect case events. And then the only thing that's transmitted is new rule updates or new organization preferences. Everything happens on device. So that way it preserves the privacy and it just gives you alerts, or it prevents you from sending it if the company marks it as sensitive.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm curious, Wayne, how in that scenario, running on device and keeping private, like how LLM Shield ensure like quality and maintain trust that it is protecting users without obviously using the user's data to train, and how you all are going about that.
Yeah, great question. So we're going to be open sourcing a portion of it, which is the rules library itself. And so we'll by default give you a library, like a pack of it, right? And you can turn on and off. Let's say we detect your name. So that way, when you accidentally type out, put your /user /name/documents, it can either warn you, randomize it, anonymize it, whatever. And we'll be publishing a whole series of those. And you can add your own. You can export it, give it to your friend, or you can contribute to different types of repositories if people want to create their own, and then you can import it yourself. Our goal is to be pretty transparent. And our goal is to do this so that way the community can go ahead and create their own rules. Sometimes in healthcare, you might have your own rules that are very different than if you're in accounting, for instance, or in legal. And so I can imagine different libraries that are more dense when it comes to certain industries. We want to be able to allow you to be able to do your own on-device scan and be able to protect the way you want to.
I was going to just add to that. I think your question earlier too about what I think about the privacy in the space and everything too. I think it's an interesting world with LLMs. I think traditional software engineering, privacy, like security has always been a big topic, and it's been sometimes a bit easier because your things are a lot more deterministic, and it's okay. You need to protect against a SQL injection attack. Like you can look up, how to do that. You need to add authentication to your APIs, like security, privacy, encrypt data, things like that. But when you start bringing in LLMs where it's a lot more undeterministic and unpredictable, that becomes a lot harder. And then you also add in the fact that it's taking the world by storm. And a lot of people are probably rushing to add things and aren't as familiar, even on the engineering side, of how you can maintain that security and privacy. It's not quite as simple. It's a very different standard. So starting to think about that. And I think tie that back into, you were talking about open sourcing and people building rules. I think it's also a good forcing function to for people to start thinking about it. It's like, oh, my company adopted this. Now maybe I'll take a look at the rules. I can look at the code. I can maybe write my own and kind of start thinking, oh, maybe I don't want this going into a large language model. I do want to anonymize this. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And to your point about the source code side of it, we have this source code monitoring mod, it's self-hosted, and then right now it supports GitHub. So you can just connect it to your GitHub account through a private access token that you generate your own permissions for. You select either your public or your private repos, and it will index it internally in that module within your own network. We don't touch it at all. The plugin can just go ahead and connect into it, and it will show up. It'll do the matching of what your employees are typing in against that. And if it pops up, it will either warn them saying, hey, it showed up in this file, or if you choose scramble, it will remove all comments. It'll remove all the spacing. It'll start making all the variables different. The function names are different. A little harder for humans to read, but LLMs actually can read that really quite well. And then we could also send the key mapping to the client, and then it can deobfuscate it as well. And so on the screen, it appears the same for the user, but on the back end, the LLMs are getting very abstract data.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really clever way of doing that. Yeah, because I can see LLMs can determine variable names if they're X, Y, Z. A lot easier for them to understand that than humans. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Wayne, just to hear a bit more about the customers that you're speaking to, are you mostly seeing companies that are already using generative AI itching for a solution like this? Or are you seeing companies that are more hesitant to adopt these technologies before they have these safeguards in place, and they're more 0 to 1 customers that need the prerequisite of an LLM Shield before allowing employees to experiment with these technologies?
Great question. We are seeing customers that are concerned more about the privacy risk and making sure that insurance companies, hospitals, medical companies, things that rely heavily on compliance, they are the ones that care the foremost of this, right? They need the solve yesterday. There are other types of companies out there that are exploring LLMs, and then they have different concerns around them as well. And we're seeing a portion of those. But right now, it's predominantly the ones that are very compliance driven. If they see the risk of this, they don't want that data out there. They know it's like one person does a back copy and paste and boom, it's all over. They want to prevent that case.
the future on-device LLMs with, let's say, Apple in a few months, we're predicting. Do you think that this is going to be something that every consumer will need to worry about? Is it something that every iPhone owner should keep in mind, is the data that they're entering and sending over to the on-device LLM, or is the risk a little bit lower if it's on-device?
If the OS has on-device scanning and filtering already in all OSs, and they can automatically detect all the LLMs and they can filter everything out and everybody trusts it, then LLM Shield doesn't need to exist. But that's not the case today. And even if Apple comes out with their own on-device Siri AI that's, LLM embedded, it doesn't protect against the other million sites now that's out there as LLMs embedded into them. Random person decides to build it, puts OpenAI SDK and or API key into it, and then gets a user to input data into it. That's at risk, right? And you don't know right now, like what type of AI is useful for which industry. So many different applications and tools are being released every day. My Twitter feed's open like the top 10 that got released today. Here are the top 100 from the last month, right? And it's just like constant. All of them are basically saying, here is an interface, hand me your data.
Super interesting. So, Wayne, yeah, it's incredible. And I think what you're working on is very timely and it makes a ton of sense. We've discussed it a ton, the concerns, and it's, again, great to see that you're taking on such a big challenge and an important challenge head on. Curious about any hot takes you might have about the future of generative AI. Is there any opinion, thought you have on where this space is headed, let's say next 2 to 5 years, that you would say is different than how most people may perceive what the future might look like?
I think the technology is so powerful the way that's influencing society. 2 to 5 years is the equivalent now maybe of like 10, 20 years type of prediction, right? And so the next 5 months is going to feel like a massive amount of progress. Just last year around this time, I got access to an early version of Midjourney. Right. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And now less than a year later, we're on this whole other side with ChatGPT transforming industries. That growth curve is just going to keep getting higher and higher and higher. I think the world is going to be very, very extremist in different ways. Productivity is going to spike. Positive is going to be really great. But it also means the negative is going to be that much greater. I'm waiting for, not that I really want this, but I think it's inevitable that there's going to be a massive example of a negative impact of AI that's going to come out soon. Someone's going to die, or something's going to happen, or something's going to get built, something's going to get loose, right? I heard the story about like someone connected to AI, and the AI instructed them to like build and write software onto their own laptop. And it connected in and started making like queries on Google or something like that. And it cut off the access right before they continued the experiment. But what remained was like the AI code that it had them copy and paste was still there, right? And so you're already seeing examples of this out there, and it's just going to get even more extreme.
It's like you said, it's like the Cambridge Analytica moment hasn't happened yet, and you're getting ahead of that this time.
We have to learn somewhere, somehow. We have to learn from previous mistakes.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Wayne. It seems like regulation is really focused on observability at this point, where legislators are driving for transparency into how these models are trained and hopefully having them tested before they're deployed. Do you think it's only a matter of time before they start focusing those efforts a bit more on the input phase of the user experience?
I hope so. Right before this call, I just chatted with the White House Office of Science and Technology about this matter, really, right? Very, very dangerous if we only rely on server-side discarding. That's the end of all of it risk, right? It's like trusting the burglar with the jewels and like, please, I trust that you'll return it. And so on-device scanning and prevention happening is critical. And we need that in the legislation. We need that in policies. There's no greater threat to everybody's data now than what's happening. That's the downside of this amazing technology that we just introduced, is that it's destroying all the privacy that we've all been building for the last few days. It's employees are leaking, but they don't even know they're leaking. That's the really dangerous part.
How confident are you in the White House and the ability of U.S. politics to deal with what's happening right now?
I'm as confident as one can be as a citizen. The people in charge are the ones that can try to rein in this technology. Unfortunately, technology tends to advance quite fast, much faster than laws can be written, enforcement can be written. And so my hope is by doing things like this, like driving more awareness with technologists like yourselves really helps with this.
For sure. Yeah. I keep getting flashbacks to Mark Zuckerberg's hearing at the Senate a few years ago and some of the questions that were being thrown at him. And obviously there was a lot of memes created of that entire situation and the naivety of the questions being asked. And I think that just really shed a light at how little a lot of policymakers understood about the technologies that underlie a tool like Facebook or really just the internet in general. But with LLMs moving as quickly as they are, I really hope that there are a lot of education initiatives that are taken up to just make the risks very clear. On the bright side, I do think the concept of what large language models do and how they work is fairly intuitive, but I guess one should never underestimate the difficulty of some policymakers getting them to grasp technological concepts. So,
I mean, when we start talking about like military secrets or their salaries, what they're being paid, and those being leaked by an intern in their office, that really resonates hard with them, right? And one other thing is that think about 12 years ago when one of my companies co-founded a company called Crashlytics. It was part of the last wave of a platform, and it was installed on, by the time we sold this, it's about 300 million devices. So that means we had the pulse of 300 million people or devices being sent to us constantly. And then that was only at the time of being a sale to Twitter. Fast forward 4 years, Google buys it from Twitter, and then Google makes it the standard of Android. By that time, we were on billions of devices, monthly active devices. One of the stipulations we put into the Crashlytics agreement to be sold up before Twitter could acquire us was they could not access that information because we wanted to be very, very privacy aware. Even that having access to that much data, Crashlytics is one of the most used software on the planet that no one knows about, and we could see people pulling out their phone, using it, the different apps and what they do with it. Incredibly valuable data on so many different scales, right? You can segment that by specific individual user behavior habits to, industry, to geographic, to company-wide, all kinds of stuff. And we wanted to make sure that was siphoned off and not part of usage at all. So this is something that, has been near and dear and something that we care about a lot. Now LLMs is the new platform. And so there's a new privacy challenge here.
Yeah, Wayne, I had an interesting parallel that I just thought of. I was reading a case about a business that handled Uber's background checks for their drivers. And the sort of takeaway from the case was that Uber was not going to take that function in-house because there would be a reputational liability for them. It's interesting to think through how a security platform, a third-party security platform like LLM Shield might have an opportunity to partner with LLM providers down the road to provide that same sort of coverage and bear that liability around confidentiality if you were to build a competency around that.
Agreed. It's like a trust escrow, right? And so I can definitely see that as well. When this frenzy starts dying down a bit and people get used to it as a productivity tool, which it is, incredible productivity tool across so many different industries, then the reality is going to set in. And then by that time, maybe a few more incidents happen. It's going to become a real, and right now I'm trying to get ahead of it a little bit, preventing really bad negative things from happening. I would not be surprised if some of the sites that we know of today are doing the exact thing that we're trying to do on purpose.
Well said. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to ask, is there anything else that you want to cover, Wayne, before we close out the interview?
No, I think this is awesome. You guys ask great questions. Put me to the test a little bit on some, which is amazing, right? But it's a real issue. This is something that probably will impact you in some way, shape, or form. Your data is probably already leaked in some way, shape, or form. Be by each other, be by yourselves, who knows, right? And so wouldn't it be great if you had something like almost like an antivirus, but a very lightweight one, right? For LLM. Protect yourselves.
Awesome. Wayne, Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the roundtable. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about you and all the cool things you're working on and LLM Shield?
LLMshield.com, and my personal site is chang.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, Wayne.